fact, and I must say that although I was in some of the most dreadful pictures of all time.
For weeks, Mulholland Drive was ghostly quiet, like the whole canyon was holding its breath after a heartbreak that sent shockwaves through Hollywood. A love story had cracked wide open, leaving behind an empty space shaped exactly like Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle. The two were once the pulse of the hills, the couple everyone wanted to be, and now, just silence. Reporters kept spinning their theories, insiders whispered half-truths, and friends posted sweet, aching tributes that only made everyone more desperate for answers. But from the man sitting above it all, the king of the canyon himself, Jack Nicholson, not a word. No slick PR lines, no sources close to Jack, no cryptic online drops, nothing. Jack's never been one to move by anyone's timeline but his own. He treats life like it's one long take, every pause, every word, exactly when he decides to deliver it. And this moment was no different. So, when he finally agreed to talk, it had to be his way. No bright lights, no cameras flashing, no stage setups. Just a small recorder on a heavy oak table in the dim glow of his living room. The evening sun poured through the window, stretching gold shadows across the canyon that had been his escape for decades. The place looked like a shrine to another time. Paintings, old photos, the smell of whiskey and dust, and a silence that spoke louder than any fame ever could. Jack sat back, still rocking those dark shades, not to hide, but because they'd become part of his legend. His face was lined by time, those famous smirks now carved into something sharper, more human. He raised his glass, ice clinking softly, like he was toasting the ghosts in the room. The silence between thoughts felt heavy, almost sacred. This wasn't small talk. This was a confession. When he finally spoke, his voice rolled out slow and gritty, like gravel under an old truck's tires. Every word hit hard, measured, heavy, deliberate. You know, the papers, the television, they go on and on about Rob, he said, his tone calm but loaded with something real. The director, the guy who made Stand By Me, the man behind The Princess Bride, they talk about Meathead. A faint, humorless smile cracked his face. It didn't reach his eyes. They get that part right. He paused. You could almost feel the memory hanging thick in the room. I guess that's what everyone knows, he muttered. The headlines, the awards, the legacy stuff. That's the public record. His voice dipped lower. But they don't know him. They never heard the silence when Rob was deep in thought, when he was really fighting with something in his head. Jack's hand tightened around the glass. They never caught his real laugh, not the one for the cameras, the real one, that big, booming one that could shake a room and make you forget all your troubles for a second. A rough chuckle escaped him. Like, ain't this all a kick in the head? He leaned forward then, and when the bottom of his glass hit the table with a sharp thud, it felt like the sound split the moment clean in half. And they sure don't know what it meant to be Rob's friend. When life started closing in on him, when the air around him got heavy and sharp, Jack's eyes flashed behind those dark lenses, and suddenly the whole room felt different. It wasn't just nostalgia anymore. It was pain. Real, raw pain. That's the story, isn't it? Jack said quietly. Not the Hollywood icon everyone worships, but the father, the man who loved his son so much, he couldn't see what was happening right in front of him. His voice dropped even lower, the words barely crawling out. Or maybe he did see it, and loved him anyway. I don't even know which is worse. The room froze, so still, it felt like even the canyon outside was holding its breath. Jack leaned in, his voice rough but honest. This is about that love, and about what comes out of it. The kind of truth you only get from someone who stood close enough to see both sides. The connection between Jack Nicholson and Rob Reiner wasn't some Hollywood bromance built on champagne and red carpets. Nah, it came from something deeper. It was forged over years of quiet understanding, the kind that doesn't need words, just trust. Their friendship wasn't born under spotlights. It was hammered into place under pressure, in the middle of one of the most legendary courtroom scenes ever filmed. A Few Good Men, 1992. People forget, Jack muttered, eyes drifting somewhere far beyond the room. Rob was an actor first. His voice softened like he was replaying a memory burned into the back of his mind. That's the key to everything. He leaned back, the corners of his mouth twitching like he could still hear the echoes from that set. He wasn't one of those directors who just stands behind the camera, barking orders like a traffic cop, telling you where to stand or when to breathe. Nah, Rob lived right there in the moment with you. Jack's tone shifted, thick with respect. He got it. What it feels like to stare down a blank page and wonder if your words are gonna hit or flop in front of the whole world. Jack's voice grew tighter, more alive. He knew the rush, the fear, the guts it takes to be out there, stripped bare, letting everyone judge you. Most directors, they stay on the outside, just watching. But Rob was in it with you. A sly grin crept across Jack's face, that old spark of mischief flickering for a second. That monologue, he said, shaking his head with a low laugh, was pure pressure. The air on that set, you could taste the tension. The scene, the famous Colonel Jessup outburst, wasn't just a moment in cinema. It was a battle of nerves. Aaron Sorkin's script was like a storm, Jack said. Every line was a blade. Hit it right, it cuts clean. Miss it, and the whole thing falls apart. He leaned forward, remembering the grind. We ran that scene over and over. Angles, reactions, everything. It was like a dance. Tom Cruise? That kid was lightning, bouncing around with all that righteous energy. And me, I was just sitting there, in that uniform, simmering. He laughed softly, that gravelly sound rolling through the quiet. Rob let me sit in that fire. He didn't hover, didn't lecture. Between takes, he'd just walk over, lean in real close, and look me dead in the eyes. Then he'd say something small, quiet, like, he really thinks he's the hero. Jack's grin faded, the moment hanging heavy again. And that's all it took, he whispered. The words lingered in the air, like smoke refusing to fade. Jack's voice dropped low, like he was afraid the moment might break if he spoke too loud. That one line changed everything in the room, he said. I never forgot it. That's what Rob said, and that was it. He wasn't just directing dialogue, he was directing the soul of the scene. Jack's tone softened, taking on that faraway sound people get when they're replaying a memory that never let go. Then, for the first time ever, he shared a story no one had heard before. Something quiet and powerful that happened behind the camera. It was after this brutal take, Jack said, eyes narrowing like he was watching it unfold again right there in front of him. The crew was resetting, lights moving, people talking, cables being dragged, the usual chaos. And Rob, he didn't go to the monitor or his mark. He just walked, straight over to me. Jack paused, his voice slowing. I was standing off to the side, cigarette in hand, just catching my breath. He smiled faintly, the memory flickering across his face. Rob stood next to me for a minute, didn't say a word, just stood there. The silence in Jack's retelling was thick, like even now it still meant something. Then his tone dropped to a whisper. After a while, he said, my old man Carl once told me, the funniest people are always the saddest. Jack's voice cracked slightly, the words hanging heavy. Then he added, I think the scariest people are the most certain. Jack let that hang in the air like smoke that wouldn't fade. He was talking about Colonel Jessup, sure, he said, his expression tightening. But really, he was talking about something bigger. The danger of believing too hard, of being too sure you're right. That talk changed something deep between them. It stopped being about the movie. In that moment, Jack continued, it turned into two men just talking about life, about what it really means to be human. He leaned forward slightly, the corners of his mouth pulling into a small, thoughtful smile. That's when I knew. It wasn't just a gig for him. He was chasing truth through every frame he shot. From that day on, their friendship locked in tight. A connection built on mutual respect and total contrast. Rob Reiner, the warm, big-hearted Hollywood liberal born into comedy royalty. Jack Nicholson, the unpredictable rebel from Jersey, always dancing on the edge of mystery. Two men from different worlds, but somehow it worked. We connected, Jack said, that half smile returning. We'd grab lunch, not at Musso and Frank's where everyone could stare, but at some hidden little spot where nobody cared who we were. Or sometimes, we'd just talk on the phone for hours. His grin faded then, his voice softening again. We talked about the Lakers, about politics, about getting older. But mostly, he paused, a faint shine in his eyes. We talked about our kids. That was it for him. That was the center of his whole world. The air around him seemed to dim, the energy of the studio turning into something intimate, something homegrown, like an old family memory flickering in candlelight. He was so proud of Jake and Romy, Jack began softly. He loved their spark, their drive, how they made their own way. He'd talk about them with this light in his eyes, that look only a father gets. It was real. It was pure. But then Jack's tone shifted. The warmth drained into something heavier. When he talked about Nick, he said quietly, leaning back with a steady breath. The light changed. His voice trembled just a bit, emotion laced in every syllable. It wasn't less love, not at all. He stopped there for a second, the silence saying more than words ever could. If anything, Jack said, it was more love, but it carried a weight, the kind that sits deep in your chest and never lets you sleep easy. It wasn't soft or simple. It was that worried kind of love, the one that keeps you staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., replaying every what if in your head. He went quiet, eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the room, like he was searching through old memories for the right words. Finally, he sighed. I've been around this town a long time, he said slowly. I've seen it all. The highs, the heartbreaks, the legends, the burnouts. His voice tightened, gaining that sharp edge that only comes from truth. I've seen the kids of famous people rise up and make it big, and I've seen others lose themselves trying. He leaned forward slightly, voice cutting through the still air. This place can mess with you if you're not careful. The access, the attention, the comfort, it's all a slow poison if you let it seep in. He paused, taking a long, deliberate breath, like he was letting that truth sink into the walls. Rob wasn't blind to it. He knew exactly what this town could do. He and Michelle, they tried to keep their kids real. Family dinners, road trips, holidays together, all the normal things that feel rare out here in the hills. Jack's voice softened again, warm, but laced with something heavier. They showed up every single time. They were good parents, really good parents. He let the words hang for a second before continuing quietly. But sometimes, no matter how high you build those walls, that poison still finds a way in. It slips through the cracks when you're not looking. The memory seemed to hang thick in the air, the silence between words doing all the talking. Then, Jack's tone shifted, lower, almost a whisper. The day the news hit, he swallowed hard. I was home. He paused again. The phone rang, sharp, too loud for how quiet the house was. He stopped, his eyes flicking down, reliving it. It wasn't an agent. It wasn't some publicist. It was a friend, someone close. His voice faltered, barely above a breath. They could hardly get the words out, just a broken whisper. Jack shook his head slowly. You don't process something like that, he muttered. The sound barely carried across the room. You just go still. He looked away, like he could still hear the voice on the other end of the line. The words came through like static, broken, unreal. Rob and Michelle, found in the house with Nick. He repeated it, softer this time, almost to himself. At first, it doesn't even make sense, he said, shaking his head again. Your mind just refuses to put it together, because the picture it paints can't be real. It goes against everything you believe should ever happen. His voice grew distant, like he was half talking to himself now. It's like the rules of the world suddenly collapse, he murmured. And what you feel, it's not grief. It's emptier than that. It's not a wave that hits you. It's a void. Like someone opened a door, and all the air just rushed out of the room. He let the silence stretch until it almost felt unbearable before continuing quietly. I hung up the phone and walked out onto the deck. He closed his eyes, reliving the moment. The city was spread out below, Los Angeles glowing, alive, completely unaware. Cars on the freeway, a helicopter slicing the air, the sun still blazing like nothing had happened. His jaw clenched slightly, and he stared down at the floor. And I remember thinking, how? How can life just keep going? How can everything still move when the world has stopped? His voice hardened, rough around the edges. That's the cruelest part of it, he said finally. The world doesn't pause for your pain. It doesn't even blink. Jack's hand tightened into a fist on the table. I didn't rush to the TV. I didn't open a single news page. I already knew what was waiting. He exhaled, the sound long and heavy, like he was trying to breathe out a memory that refused to leave. He said it bitterly, the words landing like gravel scraping across glass. The circus, he muttered. The speculation, the gossip, the same old headlines. He shook his head in disgust. They dragged out old photos again, people pretending to care, while picking the story apart like vultures. Jack let out a long exhale, the kind that sounds like he's trying to empty out the pain. I wanted no part of it, he said flatly. So he vanished, into the stillness of his house. The same house that once echoed with laughter now sat in absolute quiet, every corner haunted by memories that refused to fade. I couldn't stop thinking about Michelle, he admitted, his voice breaking for the first time. She was the steady one, the calm in every storm. His throat tightened. Rob. He was the big, loud heart of that family, Jack continued, eyes glistening under the low light. But Michelle, she was its soul, pure grace and steel. He said it softly, almost reverently. She had that quiet kind of strength that keeps everything from falling apart. Jack's jaw flexed, his expression caught somewhere between anger and heartbreak. Thinking about what they went through in those final moments, that's the part that won't leave you, he said, voice trembling slightly. It creeps in when everything else goes still. That kind of darkness, you can't face it head on. As the shocking details started spilling out, Aaron Sorkin's voice cracking with emotion on the airwaves, Jack stayed hidden away. No interviews, no statements, no appearances, just silence. I wasn't thinking like an actor, he said, shaking his head. I was just a man trying to understand how I lost a friend, and wondering if I'd missed something I should have seen. He took a deep, uneven breath, eyes clouded with the kind of weight that time doesn't lift. There was a moment, he began slowly, something that's haunted me ever since. Maybe that's why I'm even talking now. His voice changed, lower, heavier, more personal. It was a few years back, he said. Rob's birthday. They had a party at the house in Brentwood. Beautiful night, soft breeze, lights glowing through the trees. The place was packed with family, old friends, studio folks. Even Carl was there, sharp as ever, cracking stories that had everyone doubled over laughing. A faint smile crossed Jack's face for a second, a flicker of warmth before it faded back into shadow. It felt perfect, he said quietly. For a moment, everything was just right. He paused, then continued. I was out in the garden chatting with someone when I saw Nick walk in. Jack's eyes narrowed as the memory sharpened. I'll never forget that look on his face, he said, pausing to let the image settle. I've seen that look before, on movie sets, in bars, even in my own reflection back in the day. He leaned forward slightly, voice tightening. It's that kind of restless anger that doesn't know where to go, but it's desperate to land somewhere. His tone dropped low, steady but uneasy. He wasn't out of it, not in the usual way. He wasn't stumbling or slurring or making a scene. Nah, it was something deeper. Something you could feel more than see. Like the wires inside him were sparking wrong. An imbalance in the spirit, if that makes sense. Jack rubbed his hands together slowly, staring at the table like he could still see it all playing out. Later that night, he said, voice distant, I went inside to grab another drink. He hesitated. And what I saw next, I can't ever unsee it. He closed his eyes for a beat, letting the memory roll in. The main party was still buzzing out back. Laughter, clinking glasses, music drifting through the warm air. But from inside the house, I heard something else. His words slowed, careful, heavy. Voices, sharp, raised, cutting through all that noise. He froze in the hallway, every instinct telling him to turn around. But something about the tone pulled him closer. Jack took another breath, eyes dark and far away. It was Nick and Rob, he said quietly. And whatever was happening between them, it wasn't just another father and son argument. The room around him seemed to dim as he said it, the air turning heavier with every second. I knew that sound, Jack murmured. The sound of love tangled up in anger, of something breaking while you're still holding it in your hands. Nick had him cornered, Jack said, his voice low and rough. Not with his hands, but with his energy. His brow furrowed deeply, the memory flashing across his face like lightning. He was standing over his father, who was just sitting there, taking it. And Nick's voice, man, it was dripping with anger. Jack shook his head slowly. All that resentment, all that blame, it just came pouring out. Money, fame, life, every frustration you could imagine. He exhaled hard, his jaw tightening. But the way he said it, the venom in his tone, it was brutal. It was hard to listen to. The tension in Jack's face softened for a moment as his voice dropped to a whisper. Then Michelle walked in. He paused, his eyes glinting in the dim light. She had that look, he said quietly. Calm, steady, like she'd been here before, like she already knew she had to cool it down. His words came out slow, deliberate, almost protective. She stepped between them, placed her hand gently on Nick's arm, and said his name, just his name, with that unbelievable softness she always had. Jack's eyes flickered with the memory. And then he brushed her off, he said, voice trembling slightly. Not violently, just this small, sharp motion that said everything. It wasn't about force. It was about disrespect. And that cut through me. He stopped talking for a moment, breathing deeply as if trying to steady himself. Then he looked at them, Jack continued quietly. Both of them, his parents, the two people who had given him everything. And there was nothing in his eyes. No warmth, no connection, just this cold emptiness, like watching a storm roll through a person. Jack shook his head, voice dropping to a near whisper. It was like staring at something that wasn't human anymore, just hollow. His words cracked slightly, the weight of the memory pressing on every syllable. Rob noticed me then, standing in the doorway. Jack swallowed hard. Our eyes met for maybe a second. But in that 1 second, I saw everything. The shame, the fear, the heartbreak. And underneath all of it, this endless, bottomless kind of love. The kind that refuses to die, no matter how broken things get. Jack's eyes began to glisten again. He gave me the smallest shake of his head, barely a movement, but I knew what it meant. He was saying, don't, just let it be. It meant, it's okay, Jack. This is us, our problem. Jack's voice trembled on the last word, almost breaking. So, I did. I turned around, walked back out into that garden, and acted like I hadn't seen a damn thing. He went silent, jaw tight, the moment hanging heavy in the air. That, he said finally, that's my biggest regret, the one that doesn't fade. He let out a shaky breath, the sound rough and uneven. Then, slowly, he reached up and removed his sunglasses. His eyes were red, raw, lined with a pain that wasn't just about loss, it was guilt. Deep, bone-deep guilt. I thought I was respecting his privacy, Jack said softly. I thought I was respecting his faith that things could get better. He paused, voice breaking slightly. But what I should have done, what I wish I'd done, was grab him by the shoulders and tell him the truth. He leaned forward, his voice rising just enough to carry the weight of everything he'd kept in for years. Rob, hope isn't a plan. Love isn't a shield. His words hit the air like blows, sharp and full of ache. There was something in your son, something dark and twisted up inside him, and you couldn't just talk that away. He stopped there, shoulders heavy, the silence pressing down like a wall. The weight of those words hung between them, thick, unmovable, and painfully real. Jack exhaled, shoulders sinking. "Because who am I?" he said quietly. "To tell another man how to handle his own family? Who am I to tell a father to stop believing in his kid?" The words came out raw, stripped of ego. He leaned back slowly, sliding his sunglasses on again. Not for show this time, but like armor. A careful gesture to hold himself together before he fell apart again. "Aaron said he'd seen something too," Jack continued, voice steadier now, though the pain still hummed beneath it. "Doesn't surprise me. I bet a dozen of us did. We all saw the smoke rising, but we kept telling ourselves it wasn't fire. We said, he's just figuring things out. He'll be fine." Jack gave a hollow, bitter laugh that carried no joy. "We did it out of love," he said, "out of respect for Rob. But really, all we did was help him hang on to a hope that turned out to be deadly." His tone hardened, the guilt now laced with anger, not just at himself, but at the world, the system, fate, everything that failed them. "That hope," he muttered, shaking his head. "That's what destroyed everything." The conversation shifted, heavy as concrete, to the present. "The court case," he said quietly. "The endless coverage, the grim facts." His eyes dropped. "Nick Reiner's sitting in county right now, charged with 2 counts of first degree. Trials in January." He went silent for a moment, the weight of those words pressing down like a storm cloud. Then, a bitter scoff escaped him. "Justice," he said, the word tasting like ash. "They keep saying that word like it means something. But tell me, how do you get justice for something like this?" Jack's voice was calm, but there was fire underneath. "What even is justice here? You lock the kid away forever, throw away the key, and then what? You put him on trial, maybe even sentence him. And for what? It doesn't bring Rob or Michelle back. It doesn't heal the wound. It doesn't erase the horror." He let out a slow, broken breath. "It's just numbers," he whispered. "Just accounting. Trying to balance a ledger that can never, ever make sense." The silence stretched, long and fragile, before he spoke again, this time softer, gentler. "Now I keep thinking about Romy and Jake," he said. "The ones left behind, the ones who have to wake up every day and keep living." His face tightened, a flicker of pride mixing with deep sorrow. "I read what they wrote," Jack continued. "Their statement. How they focused on love, on memory, how they refused to tear down their brother, even after everything." He shook his head slowly, almost in awe. "That's Rob and Michelle right there. That's them. That's the way they raised their kids." Jack's eyes glistened behind his tinted lenses, the emotion shining through even the dark glass. In the middle of something unthinkable, in the middle of a black hole of pain and betrayal, their first instinct was grace. His voice trembled slightly. They're protecting what's left of their family's light, trying not to let one terrible act erase a lifetime of love. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight. "That's strength," he said firmly. "That's love in its purest, hardest form." Jack fell quiet again, staring out the wide window as the city blurred into the orange haze of late afternoon. The skyline shimmered, half hidden behind smog and sunlight. "Maybe that's the only kind of justice you ever really get," he said finally, voice low but sure. "That the good they put into the world, it doesn't die. It keeps going." He gestured slightly toward the skyline, his tone soft but steady now. "It lives in the kids who didn't fall apart. It lives in the movies, the ones that'll still make people laugh, cry, feel long after we're gone. It lives in the memories of the people who really knew them." Jack went silent again, the last of his words hanging in the air like the echo of something sacred. The room felt still, heavy, but not empty. There was pain, yes, but also a faint, stubborn kind of peace. The man behind the camera, and the woman who kept his world steady. That's who they were. Jack went quiet again, his gaze fixed on the stretch of city lights below. Los Angeles spilling endlessly into the horizon, glowing, breathing, moving, like life itself refusing to stop no matter how broken it gets. The air in the room turned heavy, thick with the kind of silence that carried more truth than words ever could. The recorder kept running, its red light blinking softly, picking up the faint hum of the house, the quiet whir of the canyon breeze, and the distant rush of cars far below. Jack didn't even seem to notice anymore. He wasn't giving an interview now. He was just a man, an old friend, sitting in his living room, trying to make sense of everything that had slipped away. "The last time I talked to him," Jack said after a long, still pause, "was maybe a month before it all happened." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Just a phone call, nothing special. We were talking about the Lakers, about some dumb movie trailer." He gave a small, distant laugh. The usual back and forth. Nothing that seemed to matter. He stopped, eyes clouding as the memory crept in. "But then," he continued softly, "he got quiet, just for a moment." Jack's tone shifted, warmer, softer, almost fond. And then he said, "You know, Jack, for all the craziness, we did all right, didn't we? We got to make movies. We got to tell stories. It's a pretty good life." Jack's lips pressed into a faint, sad smile. And I said, "Yeah, Rob, it is." He went silent again, that last exchange lingering like an echo that refused to fade. Slowly, Jack stood and walked toward the wide window overlooking the city's endless sprawl. His back turned to the room, the lights below painted his reflection in the glass. Just one man standing against a city that had built him up and taken just as much in return. The silence stretched, the hum of Los Angeles filling in the space where words couldn't reach. When Jack finally spoke, his voice came through the window's reflection, muffled, low, almost fragile. "He always looked for the good in people," he said. "That's what made his films so special." Jack's voice wavered slightly, but his words carried a soft reverence. He made stories about the underdogs, about friendship, about love that actually meant something. His throat tightened as the emotion started to show. He believed in happy endings, really believed in them. Jack turned back toward the room, and for a brief second, the light caught his face just right, showing every line, every tired crease. He looked worn down, but still standing, still fighting to hold on to that piece of light that Rob had always chased. "That was Rob's gift," Jack said firmly, his tone hardening with conviction. "That's what made him an artist. That faith in people, that belief that no matter how bad things got, they'd come through in the end." He paused, jaw tightening, eyes dimming under the weight of truth. "But that same faith," he added quietly, "was also what broke him." The words hung heavy in the air. "He couldn't stop believing it," Jack said, his voice almost trembling now, "even when it was killing him." He stepped closer to the window again, looking out over the glowing city below. "He spent his whole life directing heroes," Jack said, voice low and rough, "shaping villains on the big screen. But the real heartbreak, the cruel twist, was that he never realized." He trailed off, eyes narrowing, the truth slicing through him as he said it. "The villain wasn't some shadow out there in the world," Jack whispered. "It was right there, under his own roof, his own blood." The words came out barely audible, but they hit like thunder. Jack's jaw clenched tight, his face hollowed by grief and disbelief. "And that," he said, voice shaking, "that's a truth nobody can carry. Not fully. Not a father. Not anyone." The sentence hung there, final, devastating, filling the room with a silence so deep it felt alive. No sound could touch it. No comfort could break it. Just one man, one truth, and the unbearable stillness of a world that keeps moving, even when hearts have stopped. That's when it's clear. The interview's over. No big finish, no closing question. Just a quiet nod from Jack. A flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. A wordless signal that says, "That's enough." The reporter gathers their things, and as the door shuts behind them, the final image lingers like smoke. Jack Nicholson, the last lion of Hollywood's golden age, stands alone in his house above the glittering city, surrounded not by the ghosts of the roles he's played, but by something far heavier, something painfully real. The ghost of a friend he couldn't save. The silence on Mulholland Drive returns once more, but it's different this time. It's not hollow, it's heavy. Heavy with truth, with memory, with everything that had finally been spoken out loud. It's the silence that follows a story buried too long, a silence that has finally found its voice. Night has fallen over the canyon. The glow of the city below flickers like a faraway galaxy, cold and indifferent to the secrets whispered in its shadows. The recorder on Jack's table sits dark and still now, its tiny red light finally dead. And yet, the air in the room feels alive, charged, humming with the echo of a confession that refuses to fade. Outside, the wind moves through the trees, brushing against the windows like a restless thought that won't quiet down. Inside, Jack stands by the fireplace, staring into the fading embers. He hasn't turned on a single light. His shadow flickers in the orange glow, still as a statue, but his mind miles away. He reaches for an old photo frame resting on the mantel, a candid shot from the A Few Good Men set. Rob's laughing, head thrown back, eyes bright with that unshakable optimism that always defined him. Next to him, Jack's mid-smirk, frozen in a moment that now feels like it belongs to another lifetime. "You always said stories could save people," Jack mutters softly to the photo. His voice is low, almost breaking. "Guess you never thought yours would end like this." The words hang there, trembling. He sets the frame back carefully, almost reverently, as if afraid the memory might shatter. Then, his phone buzzes, a rare sound these days. He hesitates before picking it up. The screen lights his face, and there it is, a message from Aaron Sorkin. Just 5 words. "You did the right thing." Jack stares at the message for a long, long moment. The phrase turns over in his mind, like a wound he can't stop touching. The right thing. What does that even mean anymore? What's right when the truth burns everyone it touches? He sighs, long and tired, and walks to the window. The city sprawls beneath him, endless, glittering, oblivious. He lights another cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the lines of a face carved by time, regret, and something like grace. The smoke curls up and drifts into the night, joining the canyon shadows that never quite leave him. Somewhere in the distance, a lone coyote howls. The sound cuts through the quiet, raw, haunting, achingly alive. For just a second, Jack smiles, almost sadly. "You'd probably write this scene better, Rob," he whispers into the night. He exhales, the smoke drifting out toward the canyon, carrying with it the last trace of a story too heavy to ever really end. The silence returns again, but not empty this time. It's a knowing silence. A silence that breathes, that mourns, that understands. Morning settles into the canyon slowly, golden, cold, unforgiving. The first hint of dawn slices through the haze, sharp as truth, impossible to ignore. The light cuts across Jack's face, exposing the exhaustion beneath his calm. He's still awake. The ashtray beside him is full. His coffee's gone cold. And that same photo of Rob still sits on the table, like a ghost refusing to leave. Jack leans back, eyes on the horizon, as the city begins to wake below him. The night's weight lingers, but something in his face softens. Like maybe, for the first time in years, he's finally said what needed to be said. The silence remains, deep and endless. But now, it's not just grief that fills it. It's memory, it's love, and it's the unspoken truth that even in a city built on make-believe, some stories cut too deep to ever fade. He looks tired. Not movie star tired, not the kind makeup and sunglasses can hide, but real tired. The kind that sinks deep into the bones and stays there. The night's confessions still hang in the air like smoke, curling around the edges of the room, refusing to fade. A soft knock breaks the quiet. His housekeeper, Maria, steps in carefully, the morning paper folded in her hands. "Mr. Nicholson," she says gently. You want me to leave it here? He nods without turning around. When she sets it down, the headline catches his eye. Nick Reiner trial date confirmed. Jack exhales through his nose, slow and heavy, his gaze fixed on the bold black letters. Beneath the headline, Nick's photo in court, face blank, suit too big. He stares at it for a long time before muttering, he looks like a kid, just a lost kid. There's no anger in his voice, just pure exhaustion. The kind that comes when you've run out of answers. He folds the paper carefully, like it's something fragile, and sets it aside, as if refusing to let it have any more power over him. You know, he murmurs to no one in particular, voice low. Hollywood's built on stories about redemption, second chances, dramatic turnarounds. He pauses, shaking his head. But real life, it doesn't hand out rewrites. Jack walks into the kitchen. The floor creaks under his steps, every sound sharp in the morning quiet. He pours himself another cup of cold coffee, the mug trembling just slightly in his hand, enough to show the weight he's still carrying. Out the window, Los Angeles looks bright and clean, pretending nothing ever happened. The illusion of perfection gleaming under a sun that doesn't care who's hurting. Jack takes a slow sip, eyes lost somewhere past the glass. If there's any justice left in this town, he murmurs, maybe to Rob, maybe to himself. It's in the truth, even when it hurts. The morning light floods the room, harsh and golden, wrapping him in its glare. Jack sets the mug down, straightens his shoulders, and breathes deep, like a man stepping into another scene he doesn't want, but knows he has to play. The silence stays heavy but alive, as the city below wakes to another day. By noon, the canyon hums again. Gardeners trimming hedges, delivery trucks grinding up the hill, faint music echoing from someone's backyard. Life moves on. The world always does, but Jack hasn't. He paces now, slow and deliberate. A cigarette burns low between his fingers. Every so often, he stops at the window, staring out like the city might finally give him an answer. But it never does. The newspaper still lies open on the table, but a new headline has caught his eye now. Documentary in development, The Reiner Legacy. Jack lets out a dry laugh, low, bitter, disbelieving. Of course, he mutters. Hollywood never lets a tragedy rest. He shakes his head. It packages it, scores it, and sells it right back to you. In 4K. He flicks his ash into the tray, his tone sharpening. They'll make it look beautiful too. Perfect lighting, heartbreaking music, slow-motion tears. He exhales sharply through his nose. But they'll never capture what it felt like, the silence, the weight, the parts no one saw. He turns from the window, walking toward a shelf lined with old scripts, faded film stills, and dusty awards. His fingers trail across each spine, each frame, a museum of a life spent turning pain into art. His voice softens, barely above a whisper. We used to believe movies could make people see, he murmurs. His hand stops on a photo, Rob beside him on set, both laughing, caught mid-joke. But maybe, he exhales, eyes clouding. Maybe all they ever did was help them forget. The cigarette burns out in his hand, the ash dropping soundlessly to the floor. Outside, the city roars back to life, but inside, Jack stands still, surrounded by ghosts, wrapped in the glare of a morning that feels too bright for the kind of truth he just let out. The scene feels cinematic, almost poetic, except this time, there's no script, no camera, no cut to end the pain. Just a man, a memory, and a silence too honest to fade. He stops in front of an old A Few Good Men poster, the one framed in black, edges faded with time. Jack stares at his younger self glaring back, the same fierce look, the same immortal line printed beneath it. You can't handle the truth. A bitter smile creeps across his face. You were right, Rob, he murmurs. Nobody really can. Jack sets his cigarette in the tray, grabs his worn leather jacket, and steps toward the door. There's a stiffness to his movements, the weight of age and memory dragging behind him, but also a kind of quiet resolve, the kind that only comes when a man decides he's done hiding. He locks the door behind him with a soft click. Inside, the house stays still, frozen in time, holding every word, every regret, every ghost that won't let go. A gust of canyon wind slips through a window crack, scattering the ashes from the tray across the wooden floor like fading memories tumbling down the hill. Outside, Jack's car engine roars to life, an old, defiant growl breaking through the silence one last time. The story isn't over, it's just changing scenes. The afternoon sun drapes itself over Sunset Boulevard, that golden hour where Los Angeles pretends it's still full of dreams. Jack's car, a classic beast worn but proud, crawls through traffic like an aging lion moving through his old territory. Every block, every billboard, every cracked sidewalk feels like a ghost of what used to be. He passes the old CAA building, the restaurant where he and Rob once toasted a deal, the theater where they sat shoulder to shoulder, watching their names light up the screen. The world outside looks the same, but to Jack, it's haunted. Every place carries a memory, and every memory stings like a scar that never healed. He finally pulls into the back lot behind Canter's Deli, one of the last real spots left in Hollywood. No glitz, no neon shine, just the smell of old coffee, pickles, and history. The kind of comfort only time can season. Inside, the air feels thick with nostalgia. The waitress spots him instantly, but doesn't make a scene. She just gives him a small, knowing nod, the kind that says, "I know who you are, but I'll let you be." He orders a black coffee and a pastrami on rye. But the food sits untouched. The steam fades, while Jack just stares at the framed photos lining the walls. Faces of actors, directors, musicians, all gone, all frozen in their best years. "The whole town's a museum," he mutters under his breath. Except nobody remembers what the exhibits were for. At the next booth, a young filmmaker leans toward his friend, whispering, "That's Jack Nicholson." The friend glances over, eyes wide, then looks away fast. Jack catches it and lets out a faint smirk. "Don't worry, kid," he mutters. "I'm just another ghost." His phone buzzes again, the vibration rattling against the table. Another message from Aaron Sorkin. "They want me to consult on the documentary. Should I?" Jack stares at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering above the reply. The noise of the diner fades, the clatter of plates, the hum of voices, all falling away into stillness. Finally, he types just one word, "Yes." He leans back in the booth, exhales slowly, the smoke from his last cigarette still lingering in his jacket. For the first time in days, his shoulders ease just a little. There's no peace exactly, but there's something close to acceptance. Maybe some stories have to keep being told, he says softly to himself. Not to exploit, but to remember. Outside, the sun begins to sink, spilling gold across the cracked pavement. The city hums on as the shadows stretch long. Jack finishes his coffee, tosses a few bills on the table, and stands. He looks older, yes, but lighter too. Like a man who's finally realized that surviving isn't the same thing as forgetting. The door chimes softly behind him as he steps back into the glow of sunset, walking steady into the fading light. An old legend still standing, still searching, still telling the truth. He steps back into the fading light, the city humming around him, a living, restless thing that never really sleeps. Jack's ready, reluctantly. Ready for the next scene, whatever it brings. Dusk drapes itself over Los Angeles like a slow, deliberate curtain. The heat softens, the light shifts, and one by one the street lamps flicker on, trading the city's blinding glare for something softer, lonelier, more honest. Jack drives aimlessly through the canyon roads, the ones that twist and climb until you can't tell whether you're escaping something or chasing it. He rolls the window down, letting the warm wind whip through the car, carrying the scent of dry brush and jasmine. For a moment, just a heartbeat, it feels peaceful. Then the radio crackles to life, the news again. The anchor's voice slips through the static. Rob's name, the trial, the words, "Tragic legacy of a Hollywood family." Jack's hand tightens around the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Then, click. He shuts it off with a snap. "They just won't let him rest," he mutters, voice rough, almost to himself. He pulls over at one of the canyon overlooks, a place he and Rob used to hit after long, late shoots when the world felt too small and the city lights looked endless. He steps out into the cooling air, the view unfolding beneath him. Los Angeles stretching all the way to the ocean, glowing like an electric sea of dreams and lies. Jack leans against the railing, the wind cutting sharp against his face. "I remember the first time we came up here," he says softly, as if Rob might still be standing beside him. "You said this city looked like a promise." He lets out a faint, tired laugh. "And I said it looked like a trap. Guess we were both right, huh?" He laughs again, quiet, rough around the edges, the kind of sound that's half humor, half ache. Behind him, another car pulls in. A couple steps out, young, loud, full of life. They laugh, take selfies against the skyline, the flash lighting up their faces for a second before fading. Jack watches them, something like envy flickering in his eyes, mixed with a touch of nostalgia. "Don't lose that," he murmurs under his breath. "That innocence, that glow. Once it's gone, this town eats you alive." The couple drives off, their laughter fading into the night, leaving him alone again with the city's hum. He lights another cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his face, older, worn, but still carrying that spark of defiance that's pure Jack Nicholson. He exhales and smiles, a real one this time. "You were right about one thing, Rob," he says quietly to the night. "We did all right." The smoke drifts out over the canyon, dissolving into the same vast darkness that once held all their dreams. Night settles heavy over the hills, the kind of darkness that hums, thick and alive, almost like it's listening. Jack stays at the overlook longer than he means to, the ember of his cigarette glowing like a faint heartbeat in the dark. Below, the city shimmers, a sea of artificial stars built by people still chasing that same impossible dream. He flicks the cigarette away, watches the glowing tip tumble down the slope until it vanishes completely. "That's it," he murmurs softly. "That's all any of us do. Burn bright, then disappear." There's no bitterness now, just understanding, acceptance, maybe even peace. He turns back toward the car, the gravel crunching under his shoes. Then his phone buzzes, unknown number. He stares at the screen for a second, thumb hovering over ignore. But something, curiosity, habit, maybe fate, makes him answer. "Mr. Nicholson?" a woman's voice says, calm and polished. "This is Sarah Goldman from Variety. We heard you spoke about Rob recently. Would you be open to—" Jack cuts her off gently but firmly. "No interviews, no quotes. That story's been told." There's a pause, the faint hum of traffic echoing through the phone. "But Mr. Nicholson," she tries again, "people would want to—" "People," he interrupts, his voice low but sharp, "want to turn pain into entertainment. I'm done feeding that." He ends the call. For a moment, he just stands there, staring at his phone like it's something alien. The screen goes dark, reflecting only his tired face, lined, weathered, but still unmistakably Jack. He slips the phone into his pocket and looks back out at the city one last time, the lights pulsing like a heartbeat that doesn't belong to him anymore. The canyon air moves around him, cool and electric, carrying the faintest echo of a laugh that only he seems to hear. Jack closes his eyes, breathes deep, and stands still in the dark. Just a man, a memory, and the truth he can finally live with. Then he powers the phone off, drops it onto the passenger seat, and starts the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness, carving a thin silver line down the winding canyon road. The radio stays off. The road stays empty. It's just Jack, the hum of the engine, and the kind of silence that feels like it's listening. Halfway down, he slows, passing Rob's old street. The gates closed now, the windows dark. For a heartbeat, he considers stopping, but he doesn't. Some ghosts, he knows, are better left where they sleep. At the bottom of the hill, he pulls over beside a small roadside bar, the kind of place where time stopped somewhere in the 70s. A neon sign buzzes weakly, casting a tired pink glow across the cracked parking lot. Inside, a handful of locals nurse their drinks, lost in their own little worlds. Jack steps in. The bartender clocks him instantly, but doesn't make a scene. No whispers, no stares. Just a simple nod, the quiet respect of someone who's seen enough life not to ask questions. Jack orders a whiskey. Neat. The glass slides across the bar without a word. He raises it slightly before taking a slow sip. To Rob, he says softly, and to the dreamers, the ones who still believe the light's worth chasing. The liquor burns its way down, smooth but sharp. The jukebox hums an old blues tune from the corner, the kind that sounds like the world sighing through a trumpet. For a fleeting moment, the weight on Jack's shoulders eases, not gone, but lighter. Outside, the night carries on, patient, infinite, like it's waiting for the next chapter to begin. Morning arrives quietly, the canyon wrapped in silver mist. Jack wakes in his chair, the half-empty whiskey glass still resting beside him. The light spilling through the windows feels softer now, warmer, like the whole world just exhaled. He steps out onto the deck, coffee in hand, the air crisp and alive. Below him, Los Angeles stretches endlessly, a city that never stops shining no matter how dark its stories get. The smell of wet earth and jasmine drifts through the air, a small, perfect reminder that even after the hardest nights, the sun always shows up. Jack takes a slow sip, the corners of his mouth lifting just a little. For the first time in a long time, he's not running from the past. He's just letting it be. He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out that old photo again, the one from A Few Good Men. Rob's laughing, eyes full of fire and belief. Jack smiles faintly. "You'd hate all the noise, buddy," he mutters. "But maybe it's good. They're still talking about you. Means you mattered." The wind picks up, tugging gently at the photo's edges. Jack doesn't stop it when it slips from his fingers. He just watches as it flutters off the deck, catching the golden light before disappearing into the canyon below. A fitting goodbye. He takes one last drag from his cigarette, exhaling slow. The smoke curls upward, twisting into the bright morning sky. "You always said every story needs an ending," he murmurs. "Guess this one finally got one." Jack turns back toward the house. The door closes softly behind him. Outside, the city hums to life again. The world spins on. And up on Mulholland Drive, the silence, the same silence that once felt unbearable, now carries peace instead of pain. It's not the ending anyone wanted, but it's the one that feels true. Because in the end, legacies aren't built from tragedy. They're built from the love, the laughter, and the light that remain long after the curtain falls. And somewhere in the vast sprawl of Los Angeles, the story of Rob Reiner, Michelle, and the friend who finally broke his silence lives on. Not as gossip, not as scandal, but as a reminder that even in a town built on illusion, some truths are too human to fade. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful Hollywood stories like this one. And drop your thoughts in the comments below. What part of Jack's story hit you the hardest? We want to hear your take.